Buenas noches, amigos, and welcome to the penthouse of the spiritual bungalow. Mr. Noman, how are we doing today?
Mi amo, it's mi amo.
Mi amo, hey,
Hey!
fiesta. Arriba.
Wow. I'm singing at the party.
Are you partying because you're back to work now after
Yeah, it's
parental?
a party, totally.
It's a party. Yeah, well,
It's
it's
a
a party.
party.
It was a party out by that dumpster for sure.
Party out by the dumpster that smells of human excrement, yes.
Yeah.
What a fine way to earn one's living.
Well, it's the way. Where there's a will, there's a way.
It's thorns and plows. But if thorns and plows weren't enough, in the curse pronounced in Genesis, modern society has decided that we should subject people to the vile excrement of mentally unstable individuals who should be given help. But we're not going to do that because that wouldn't be compassionate. What instead we're going to do is allow them to run around with absolutely no restraints whatsoever. Yeah, that's
So there was a
there's like, well, I mean, this cuts in pretty well, but
yeah.
I was just going to say there's Sartre's line about hell as other people, or maybe more Shakespeare's line is hell is empty and all the devils are here. Some people definitely have been. Some people are definitely working their hardest to bring those to be. But anyway, on to the news.
Yeah. So so there's a penitential rite after a naked man stands at the Saint Basilica's main altar. I was encouraged by that. This must to be an appropriate response instead of like saying it's like, oh well, who am I to judge? Like I think a Vatican streaker is worth putting on a bit of sackcloth and ashes for.
But putting up statues of naked female Amazonian deities is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, that's not great. But we're not blaming them for consistency right now. We're just trying to.
Why not? Why can't I?
I don't know. So also in the news, important stuff like this, like are you an old soul? 4 zodiac signs with wise and mature personalities. I love that.
Yes, indeed.
That
wise and mature.
Wise and mature.
Wise and mature. Sitting on the beach. That thumbnail makes it really.
I love it. Yeah.
That's good stuff. The great journalism over at IdeaPod.
IdeaPod. It's excellent stuff. And of course, we've just come to learn that Mars is declared unsafe for humans to live.
I, for one, am glad
that
a group of people came together
and
made sure everyone knows that Mars is dangerous. You'll
die, man.
This is
it'd be very unsafe for you to live on Mars.
This is a great step.
That kind of looks like Australia. That reminds me of the Outback.
It's just some Australians like drinking a bottle of water on there.
Hey, I reckon this.
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
I reckon this rock ain't fit for human life. Maybe the old dingo.
Matt Frad's out there having a knife fight with a lizard.
Yeah.
On the surface of Mars.
Having a knife fight.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat that Sister Wilhelmina is even on Unilad. It's going all over the place.
Yeah, well. The really nice thing about it is that, of course, she's a woman of color, and so
oh yeah,
it's harder to ignore.
That's true. Yeah. And she's also went to exclusively to the traditional Latin Mass. So there you
Well,
go.
I don't think the Vatican wants you to talk about that. As a matter, I think I might hear black helicopters coming right outside of your house.
That's funny because that actually ties into our. That ties into our. It's actually one of the lists. It's actually listed in one of the conspiracy theories that
Is
we're
that
going to
the
be
little
talking about
black
today.
helicopters?
Yeah, there's the black helicopters conspiracy, which is in 1960s the John Birch Society. Who's John Birch? Do you know?
I've heard that before.
Should I look it up? Should we go down? Oh, it's an American right-wing political advocacy group, anti-communist, supports social conservatism, ultra-conservative,
Okay, so are they
radical
the good
far-right.
guys or the bad guys in this one?
I don't know, but they promoted it that asserting that the United Nations force would soon arrive in black helicopters to bring the U.S. under U.S. control. A similar theory
To bring the U.S. under UN control.
UN control. I don't know how the UN would come under how the U.S. would come under UN control. It seems like a
When the
little bit
UN is in the
unfair.
U.S.
Yeah, well, that's true.
and they
And they also have
keep
like
the lights
those little
on and
like those little like
they
crappy
guard
like
the
blue
building.
helmets. And they're just like, and they're mostly Canadians.
Hey, you stop
Being American.
Stop shooting at Vietnam.
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yes, a country with what is it? The 10th of the population of the United States?
Canada? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's less than 10th.
Less than a 10th of the
Yeah.
population of the United States.
Well,
Would,
Canada, Canada has less population than California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's less than a 10th. Because
Yeah.
how many people are in the United States? Is it
It's,
300 or 400 million?
yeah, I think so, yeah.
And there's less than there's
Just 30
under 40
million.
million in Canada.
Yeah.
It's between 30 and 40 million. I don't know the exact number, and I'm not going to bother to look it up because that would be responsible. But I'm saying less than a 10th of the people.
So there's
I highly doubt they were going
334 million people in the United States.
Okay.
And so it is about a 10th.
Yeah.
And then Canada is 36 million. Oh, so we're slightly more than a 10th of the population. Wow.
I think now, though, when that was a conspiracy, I wonder what the population difference was. I bet it was less than a 10th. Like
Yeah,
we're gonna come down there and we're gonna be like, hey, you, no, stop.
You guys, but maybe we should though. I mean, because there is some pretty dumb stuff that happens over there.
Hey, you guys, you need to stop.
So like for instance, this with so a school principal resigns after showing Michelangelo's David in class. A parent called the lesson pornographic. That's pornographic to show the statue of David.
So uncivilized barbarians.
Oh, sorry, there's pornography on the stream. Where's the leaf? Where's the leaf, man? What have I done? No.
If you were looking for a cue, that would have been it.
Oh.
Oh, the red hot gates of hell are creeping open.
There you go. Good job.
I got it.
You got it.
I got it, boys.
that I remember seeing that. It's a little bit stale. It's not exactly the cutting edge of news, but it made me very angry when I saw it.
But also, well, if you want something a little bit more recent, there's so the Utah primary schools banned the Bible for vulgarity and violence.
Satan is hating his bunkers for you, you blasphemous heathens.
No Bible. That's too it's too vulgar.
Oh my goodness. So
is it not vulgar for like some of the Mormon beliefs, like that. Well, they've got a lot of vulgar beliefs. I don't want to really recount them, but the
Everyone, put your magic underwear on and close
the
your eyes.
magic underwear is one, and then you have like your planet with that you can live that has all your wives
I mean,
frequenting it. Yeah,
I mean, it's vulgar insofar as it basically shows that Mormonism is silly. That's a kind of vulgarity, I guess, if you're a Mormon.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
isn't it? I don't
remember. I
understand
remember
though,
one
'cause-
time. So I actually got into it with a mutual friend of ours, and I were walking along one day, and we were approached by the Mormons, and I really got into it with him about the historicity of the Bible versus the Book of Mormon.
right?
And I was like, how can you like? We have a historical tradition here with the Old and New Testaments that we don't have with this. How are you gonna? Do you have anything to say about that? And he was just like, oh well, just I just like when they I just like took the book.
feels,
I took the
the
book and then I
feels.
like prayed about it and I was like, no, I think this is the right thing. Like, are you stupid?
Well, it's.
No.
I mean, it is unfortunate though because we do sort of have this sort of Schleiermachian sort of understanding of faith where it is about sentimentality. You know, it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
I mean it's a serious problem.
yeah,
But I mean the real Catholic definition of faith is
act of the intellect.
yeah,
Assent
an
of
act
the
of, it's
intellect.
the assent of the intellect to that which is revealed on account of the authority of the one doing the revealing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's kind of the beginning of knowledge because you have to actually believe in something in order to actually go through the steps of actually perfecting the knowledge of it. I mean, it'd
Yeah,
be
well, to
hard to.
properly expect it. So,
Yeah.
and there's a number of things as well that, so St. Thomas talks about this. There's a
Right.
number of things that are articles of faith for those who do not have the sufficient time, energy, or intellectual capacity to grasp the proofs thereof. So, for example, the existence of God. The existence
Sure.
of God is an article of faith for those who do not have an understanding of the proofs for the existence of God. For those who have understanding for the proofs of the existence of God, those are no longer articles of faith.
So you
Those
could
are
say.
articles of knowledge.
So you could actually, you and I could actually say that we don't have faith in the existence of God.
Yeah, that's so. It was very
It's true,
interesting.
though, yeah, in
It
a
was
way,
very
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I was because he's a very interesting figure who I'm not entirely interested in, but it came up in my YouTube feed one day,
Right.
and it was Carl Jung, and he was asked in an interview, and I guess it was quite a famous interview. He's asked in an interview, "Do you believe in God?" And he was talking about when he was younger. He said, "Did you believe in God?" He said, "Oh yes." And he says, "Do you believe in God now?" And he says, "I don't really know how to answer that question. I don't really believe. I know."
Interesting.
And so you get a similar thing in St. Thomas. Once you know the proofs for the existence of God, it's sent to the existence of God as a matter of knowledge. It's
Right.
demonstrated. It's not an article of faith. Now, the Trinity, it can't be demonstrated, so that is an article of faith. But on the same to what we were speaking of previously, the Trinity can only be understood once believed.
Right.
And then you can start to wrangle with the mystery in a respectful but also intellectual way.
Yeah, the one of the things that because I don't know if you have to believe in something always to understand it. Like, I mean, I think I understand the basis and the basis of, like, um like the heresy of Arianism without believing in it. Like, you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
but
I mean,
you understand the heresy of Arianism as a defective Christology.
Sure.
So you don't believe it. You believe you believe the correct Christology.
Right. I guess I believe that heresy exists. So, and then I had to believe that the heresy exists because I was
You
told
don't
that the heresy
believe that the
exists.
heresy exists. You know that the heresy exists.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, I guess I had to actually have some sort of authority telling, because there's always some element of faith, unless I actually met had a firsthand account of Arianism. I'm believing the book and the authority of the publisher and the information that's being disseminated to me. Because that's why I like the scholastic understanding of faith, is because it is like about as broad as possible.
Yeah, well, history. I mean, history is a sort of illuminative example, because it's, of course, a question of witness, right?
Yeah.
And so, with history, there is always something of a question of witness. That's why satirists have come up with sort of the Dawkins delusion, right? Richard Dawkins doesn't really exist. We have more proof for Jesus than we do for many other historical figures that are not. Their existence isn't under question, precisely because there's no moral import to whether or not they existed. So, like,
what about reptilian elites?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean,
like
lizard people. Of course, lizard people exist. I mean, because such brilliant minds have come to us with unprovable and unexaminable proofs.
No, there's proof. I saw a video on YouTube of George Bush speaking this one time. You can see like the film on his eye closing over his other eye.
That's real. Because the videos on the internet, they're real.
They're all real.
They're all real
stuff.
100%. Just like that. Just like the little orphan Annie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and Joe Rogan.
Oh my gosh, should I bring that up?
Man, she's good.
She's good. Yeah. Or when Arnie is singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Yeah. That's all real. That really happened.
It really happened. 100%.
100%. It's like those photographs we have of the Loch Ness monster. Like, that's totally like a.
But it does actually. It raises a point though, because I mean I know we're kind of gone a roundabout way of getting to the topic, but the
us never.
You have like so what would you say? Because we want to talk about Malik and Martin and kind of like riff on kind of some trad conspiracies, but it's just weird because so many these there are so many credible weird things that actually happened. And I remember, so like for instance, like you believe basically everything that Taylor Marshall presents in what's that famous book that
Infiltration. Well, I don't believe everything in the book, but I do like the stuff
but it's well sourced.
Yeah, he does source the book. I definitely he's got some loose threads that I don't know what they're doing in there. They're interesting bits of information, but I don't know what they're doing in there, and there's nothing to corroborate it. Sort of like the statement that like St. Gallen was a popular holiday spot for Aleister Crowley. I don't know what to do with that. It kind of hints. I think that the hint is supposed to be that maybe he was associated with these Benedictines who are less than who are, as far like, if I remember correctly, the only real statement that we have here is James Grimes' testimony to the case that these Benedictines, there's something off about them. McCarrick visits them and comes back a different person.
Yeah, that
He's-
does seem like kind of like clutching at straws a
So
little bit there.
there's like Aleister Crowley, the Benedictine monastery at St. Gallen, and then
Yeah, I mean,
Cardinal
like,
McCarrick.
that
And there's
just
this like
seems
very
tangential.
like that stuff. I don't know what's going on there. I think he's just trying to like, but he doesn't fill that in, which is nice actually. So I
Right.
thought
Well, 'cause
that
if there's nothing
like,
there,
well,
yeah.
he's very clickbaity on his videos, but the book was, I thought, very well balanced.
Hmm.
And I thought that it was out of place when he was being criticized,
Right.
even by people who were his friends for the book.
Right.
I think they looked at the title and they didn't read the whole book.
Right.
Now I was persuaded by a lot of the stuff around John Paul I and some of the mob connection stuff that I was like,
interesting. Yeah.
that could be true.
It's funny because that's the one part.
That's
of
a
the,
lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff.
Because that's the one part of the book that Bishop Schneider didn't endorse.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. But but back to Malachi Martin though, it was interesting because I remember one of Taylor Marshall's earlier episodes. He says that there's this scene at the beginning of that novel where a woman is like raped by a cardinal or something. It sounds like horrible, but apparently it's supposed to be that that infamous cardinal who was that English cardinal who was involved in sort of the electioneering with Pope Francis, who died kind of shortly after his election or whatever. Yeah, and because there's a woman who has testified for him, and then like Taylor Marshall, I think he didn't just suggest. I think I think there was a it was either Malachi Martin or someone else who actually said that that cardinal was supposed to be that same cardinal, and that it was supposed to be a real thing that actually happened in the Vatican or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we do. Part of the problem is that when weighing the stuff critically, you do have to kind of.
But I don't think you wanted to weigh this critically. I think you wanted to like sort of like go take this stuff at a different angle. Like I think you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, but don't we weigh critically? Don't we weigh critically like the don't we weigh critically things like the accusations against Cardinal Pell?
Oh yeah.
Right, but so we like, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. But we don't. Part of the problem is we don't get a great accounting of this from the other side. As far as I can tell, like they don't even bother to address they're like, that. What are you talking about? Conspiracy theory. You could just give a reason to count instead of shouting an epithet. I would. No, if someone was if someone came to me, and was genuinely convinced that King Charles III was a lizard person,
right?
I think I definitely like I wouldn't make fun of them. I would try to reason with them.
Right. Well, and I think that some people there's actually a number of people of the sort of like the fringy sort of variety who actually do believe that, or believe that he's like, like one of these, he has that, because there was all the things that there's these things in the coronation with, they had like leafy coronas and stuff that was added to the traditional, and like sort of like how there was like multiple faiths sort of represented, and so Charles is he's defender of not just the Christian faith but of sort of like all faiths, so he has this kind of sort of New World Order sort of outlook or whatever.
Pause.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to represent the what is the yeah. what
But
they
it's a
would.
question of a lack of education. So if we pause on that specific point, monarchs are always the defenders of people of different faiths within their realms up to their rights. And we have these notions of rights in Thomas Aquinas. If people will go and read a book, it might illuminate their life. Thomas says, like, you can't forcibly baptize people. You can't take the infants from people and forcibly baptize them, all that sort of thing.
But he also
Because
says
it is
there's
a
no-
violation. It is a violation of the authority of the Father to do that. Now,
But there's no right to error either, though.
no, but there's no right to error, but there is a requirement of the monarch to be clement.
Sure.
Clemency is a requirement, but that's the distinction between amnesty and pardon. And this is a distinction that is lost on moderns. And so the monarch is supposed to be the head of the defender of the faith in the various countries. If you and I go to Jordan, which is not a Christian country, the king of Jordan is supposed to be our protector.
Yeah, and he's actually done a pretty good job of that, from what I understand.
That's his job.
Yeah.
If we look at the example of Blessed Karl of Austria, the famous story of the Jews, there was a rabbi and some members of the laity amongst the Jews who came as he was walking by with his entourage, and everyone kneeled except for the rabbi, who turned away from him towards the temple and began to recite a prayer. And he began to recite something, and none of the Austrians knew what was going on, and they were going to actually like hit him for being disrespectful to the emperor. And Blessed Karl stops them, and he says he's praying the prayer for the emperor, and I'm not going to stop him. Right. So
is there so when is it, would there be a justification for something like the Reconquista then?
well, which one are you talking? No, not the Reconquista. You mean you mean the expulsion of non-Christians from the Iberian Peninsula.
Yeah.
Well, it was a very controversial thing at the time.
Right.
People tend to forget.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
The justification was more or less utilitarian.
Right.
That the population was so heavy, like the population was so high that it was causing serious problems.
Right. Right. So that happened after the Reconquista.
Yeah. The expulsion, and it is a controversial issue in history.
Yeah, I suppose like there's kind of that the idea of like sort of like the Muslim sort of like taqid that was sort of that was being combated, that they said that where they could lie about their faith and about what they were doing in order to sort of thrive and sort of to create and to sort of disseminate sort of dissent amongst their sort of the Christian rulers. But yeah, but that is still utilitarian.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a complicated historical issue, and it's not. It gets a lot of shade thrown on it by Catholics as well.
Right.
There's a lot of shade thrown on it in contemporarily as well.
Right. Yeah.
It's not all like beaches and rainbows and rosebuds everywhere. Like everyone's happy with it while it's happening.
Yeah.
The Catholics who are, I believe, objecting to it as well, if my memory serves me correctly.
It's interesting too, though. Like, I mean, because obviously we would defend the actions of like the First Crusade, which was which was a very sort of black and white issue. I mean, in some ways, it was a little bit difficult in that they were trying to import sort of a theological tenet of Islam into Christianity, which is the idea of
no, just war comes from no. Just war.
Not just war, but the idea of but the idea of kind of like of holy war almost in a sense that
No,
that
no,
an
no. Well, no, no, no,
of
no.
absolution.
That's in Saint Augustine.
No, of no, but of well, I mean this was sort of the theory of a of I'm not, what's the name of it? Raymond Ibrahim actually has said that it was that it was actually um that it wasn't the idea of just war that that was disputed, because it was a just war. It was about whether a person could merit grace through doing war, through the action of war. And
No,
so so whether you could
the
be like,
merit was
yeah.
no, it was an armed pilgrimage.
So it was the pilgrimage that was
Yes, no.
okay.
So
Yeah,
historical issues. So
yeah,
interesting here. So with the First Crusade,
yeah.
before there were more crusades, with the First Crusade, the indulgence was attached to reaching Jerusalem.
Hmm.
They just happened to be going with lots of swords,
Right.
right? And it's an indulgence.
Hmm.
Not like yeah, so it's an indulgence. It's got a set term, and it was about reaching Jerusalem and liberating the property.
Right.
Not and part of it was a number of abuses that had occurred at this holy sepulchre previously. For example, like requirements that the knights actually desecrate the altar in order to be allowed in to finish their pilgrimages. So
Oh wow.
before the
Yeah.
Crusades, there's this whole like genre of like the very clever Christian getting around the wicked Saracen, where he there was one story I can recall in particular where it was the knight was only allowed to complete his holy pilgrimage if he would urinate upon the Holy Sepulchre. And so the knight very cleverly put water inside of a little canteen and made it look like he was doing that, but he wasn't really. Take that, you silly. We got you. I didn't desecrate it at all. So yeah, those kinds of stories going around. So whether or not it was true, those were the reported abuses at the time.
Interesting.
Christians were being ill-treated.
Yeah.
The local Christians obviously being ill-treated, but pilgrims were also being ill-treated. And so it was the location. So what happened later was Innocent III, if I recalled correctly, because there was no location for the wars in France against the Cathars, but they were crusades, he attached indulgences to periods of service. So if you served for 300 days, you got an indulgence. So you take the cross, and then you are in the field for 300 days. You receive an indulgence. I think it was 300 days. I'm not sure. But even then, they had problems with perpetual turnover, because the backbone of the crusade was Raymond de Montfort, and him and his family were basically the ones who really held the line the whole time. And then they had this kind of in and out of crusaders. Anyway, who is this author? Who is this author who was saying this?
Oh, Raymond Ibrahim. He's the
he's a sort of contemporary.
Yeah, it's called Sword and Scimitar.
He may have misunderstood.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the historical and juridical elements.
Yeah, that does make more sense. But I guess, like, in effect, because the soldiers were celebrating.
And the only other thing that,
because the soldiers were celebrating because they were finally able to actually win sort of like redemption and grace from this profession that constantly caused them sin, effectively, because many of them were devout Christians, and there was
but it was it was in consequence of that profession allowing them to perform the action, which was retake Jerusalem.
right. Yeah, that's kind of what he was. But then
So it's
yeah,
but it's not direct
right.
in that way,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
know,
not
but
a
I
new
mean,
it's not a new idea.
sure.
I mean, for goodness sake, like
Well, like
in the early church, there was problems with soldiers for sure.
Right.
Like the inability to receive communion for a year if you killed someone and you were a soldier.
Yeah.
You were just doing your duty. But I think that sort of thing got straightened out around the time of Constantine. Or shortly thereafter. Like the notion of fighting for Christian civilization against that's goodness. That's in the King Arthur romances, and that's not just in the King Arthur romances. That's in the texts contemporary with or around the time that we say the king, which we have very few of, but around the time that we have like the King Arthur, or the notion of the Christian Anglo-Saxons fighting off the Normans, the pagan Normans. Not Normans, the pagan Norsemen, sorry.
Norsemen.
That they were, that it was just, and because part of the notion, and here's another thing that he's missing, is that if one, according to St. Thomas, if one dies fighting for the faith and is killed because they are a Christian, they are a martyr. Even if they're a combatant.
Oh.
So Blessed Constantine the 11th, the Greek soldiers, and the various Italian sailors who died fighting on the walls of Constantinople
Died the death of
are all martyrs,
right?
According to St. Thomas.
Yeah.
Wow, we got really far afield.
Oh yeah, I mean,
we were talking about lizard people, and the Bible was getting banned.
Crusades, yeah.
Okay, so let's get the tracks. Let's get the wheels back on the tracks, shall we?
Okay, so Malachi Martin. What do you want to talk about Malachi Martin?
Oh goodness, that was the track that we were talking about.
Yeah, well, that's the name of the episode. Yes, but the
Windswept
Tiki House, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a poke fun at the concept too, because all of this stuff is incredibly dull and dreary and depressing, and no fun is to be had.
Yeah,
but you don't really see the point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah. I mean, even if it's real, what is the point? Like, what is the point about knowing about Bohemian Grove and knowing about Epstein's Island? These conspiracy theories that became true as well. Like so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of that's kind of how I feel about being somewhat convinced by the argument in Taylor Marshall's book about mob associations, and then being somewhat convinced that it's possible,
right?
That foul play was afoot. Somewhat convinced, but it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, it changes like really nothing. Yeah.
The only thing it really does in many cases is it kind of teaches us a lesson about being naive, maybe, but
yeah, well, I mean,
it's really annoying when it's in this sort of cryptic nonsense. Knock it off with the cryptic nonsense. If you're going to tell everyone, like Malachi Martin was the worst for this. The man was absolutely full of it.
But it's funny though, because when we watched that episode of Firing Line, when he was talking, when they were talking about the Nova sort of priest, he wasn't cryptic at all. Yeah.
No. He was pretty stapled together for that. But no, he did that. He was that sort of he writes this book, and it's like a tell-all, but not really. But or his weird, everything about him is weird, right?
Yeah, well, do you
Supposedly
know?
he's laicized, but supposedly he keeps his vow of chastity, but not his vow of poverty or obedience. He's dispensed from those.
You know what
And
we
then
forgot?
a friend
Yeah,
of mine rather
it's
said,
really weird.
well, that's excellent. He neither has to deal with the problems of domestic strife, and he can be as rich as Croesus. Doesn't have to listen to a person. Yeah. Which is exactly, he keeps his vow of chastity. So, okay, well, but he doesn't have to be obedient. And then there's this weird documentary I saw where he was like Malachi Martin, freelance exorcist.
That's
no.
No.
Okay, I'm not a theologian.
Yeah.
But exorcists are given their faculties by the bishop.
Yeah.
Okay? They have to have authority. It's not some sort of magical thing.
Yeah.
Because the real bishop, incorrect. The real exorcist in any jurisdiction is the bishop.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
If my memory serves me correctly, the real exorcist in any jurisdiction is the bishop, and he.
RESPECT, respect authority.
Okay.
Okay. Obey authority.
You're really gonna have to clip that if we keep this up. The real authority is the bishop. He's the exorcist for the diocese, and then he appoints, similar to in the Old Mass, and I think in the Novus Ordo, I don't know because I don't really go to them. No. Yeah. It'd have to be a situation when you run out of food in the cupboard kind of situation. But other than that, no, thank you. And he deputes these exorcists, kind of similar to as far as I know, the deacon is given the deputation to read the gospel,
right,
in a solemn high mass, right? He doesn't just presume to do it. There's a blessing. There's the munda corme. There's the blessing. The priest gives him permission because the priest is the one who's supposed to do it. Technically, actually, because the solemn high is taken from the pontifical, which is actually the pontifical high mass is supposed to be the roadmap for all other liturgies. The bishop is the one who gives the deacon permission because the bishop traditionally has a crozier and a book of gospels.
Sure.
Because the bishop is supposed to preach the gospel. That's why I always love the famous story of Saint Kentigern, where he used to wade into a river in Ireland up to his knees that was freezing cold and recite all 150 psalms at once as his daily prayer. But he would always wear a surplice, I think, or maybe an alb, a stole. He would take his crozier and he would take his book of gospels just in case he had to do bishop things. He was interrupted in the middle of reciting the psalms in the freezing cold river. He was ready.
Wow.
They used to care.
But the thing that I found interesting about Malachi Martin, to go back a few steps, is that he wasn't just like sort of like some crazy guy. It wasn't like just like William Tapley, who's like talking about like the phallic symbols at the Denver airport. The news witness
and gloom coming soon,
or seeing the visage of Trump and the lightning that strikes the Vatican Tower. Like that's just
he didn't see it, Sister so and so pointed it out to him, and he was like, "Oh,
No, I think the sister was the one who actually said, "It's like, oh, there's also Moses too there, William. You can see the
oh, who
prophet
cares?"
Moses, yeah." But the but he was actually a pretty articulate, individual. Like he was kind of like the modern equivalent of what's his name, Moynihan. Richard Moynihan, who kind of is just a Vatican insider. And so there's an episode in Fire and Line of him just talking with William Buckley about kind of the situation of this newly ordained Pope, which was Pope John Paul
Malachi
I.
Martin, or
Malachi the
you're
Martin.
talking about Malachi Martin?
Yeah,
okay.
Malachi Martin. So he's talking about like the situation in the Vatican after the election of Pope John Paul I. It was a very sort of unique sort of window of history within the church its time, and it was a very sort of distressing time, arguably more distressing than ours, because it seemed like Marxism was really becoming much more explicit and popular amongst multiple members of the magisterium, and he was pointing out, citable examples, and
Yes, it's much
like
less
how,
disturbing when it's just obvious and it's been around for decades.
yeah, well, yeah, I know, but I mean, it was, yeah,
No, he said it's more disturbing than our own time. It's like, yeah, we're used to it. It's like
I guess so,
that.
yeah.
It's like the human waste behind the dumpster. I was like, well, of course it's there. Where else would it be?
Yeah, but I mean, it was
It's like my ladder up right over top of it.
Yeah, there was yeah, there was but there was even an article in the Roman Observer, which was, we must teach our children the good things about Marxism. So it just was, it was really strongly leaning in that direction before John Paul I's death.
We must now teach our children the good things about Marxism. Striking color scheme. Like red and yellow. Like,
sure, yeah.
That's a winning combination for contrast.
Well, it definitely brings the attention to the eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the one good thing I'll say about Marxism. Striking color scheme.
Well, some of Marx's criticism of capitalism were legitimate.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. that could definitely get us into.
It's not really Marxism. This is kind of like.
Well, sure. No, it just was Marx.
Any human being who isn't like some sort of Austrian economist who's locked himself in a closet alone for 40 years and has never felt the touch of a woman like that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what most of Das Kapital is about kind of the arbitrariness of how the capitalist system sort of works and how it's kind of stupid. And it's true. I mean, it's
some of it is.
Yeah, I mean, but because there's just sort of like assigned value to goods, and yeah.
But there's assigned value to goods in communism.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I don't really want to.
People just assign value to goods, as it turns out. Hey, if it's not really that nice, then why did you stay in the Winter Palace the night of the Russian Revolution when you took over Moscow, Lenin? Huh? I bet that big fluffy feather bed with the gold poster. Like, I don't care if it's gold. Yes, you do. People like gold. It's nice.
It is nice. I like
nice.
I liked the anecdote that you had about how there was like you saw like a copy of Das Kapital that was like $70 in the bookstore.
Yeah, it was very I think
arbitrary
it was like
value
100 or something. It was
very
arbitrary. Very limited edition run of Das Kapital. Well, thank you. Yes, This book is for free on the internet, by the way.
But it's nice. You get the nice like leather binding, and
you get a nice like gilt spine. All of this. Is the necessary is very necessary and fundamental and part of the labor, John, and it is not at all arbitrarily especially because it's a used bookstore,
right?
So the publisher gets none of the money.
Right.
The used bookstore, someone comes in with this copy of Das Kapital and they give them like 40 or 50 bucks for it, and then they sell it for 120
Yeah.
on speculation. It's
Yeah.
like pure capitalism. It's merchants.
Right.
It's the mercantile trade where you buy something on speculation and sell it at a higher price somewhere else. And according to Marx, put no value into it whatsoever.
Right. Good
Hilarious.
stuff.
I hope someone bought it.
The yeah, but it was kind of the about the character of Malcolm Martin again. It was so he was this Vatican insider who he saw kind of all these things that were happening in the Vatican, and he kind of knew something about Pope John Paul the First. What was his name again? Like, do you remember his name?
No,
yeah, I
goodness,
don't
I
remember
can't keep
either.
track of all this.
Yeah, but he said he was conservative of his own right and stuff, and he was talking about the papacy of Paul VI and kind of hoping that this was going to be in a different direction. But then he had another episode of Firing Line where they're talking about this book that he came out with called Jesus Now, and it was about how like the youth can sort of like interact with Jesus. So for youth of the 1970s, how Jesus is relevant to them. It's just like he's such a Jesuit. It's really funny because it just was.
Well,
like,
what is the content of the book?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know what the content of the book
of
is.
Jesus
I
Now?
think
Yeah.
I think you've showed me the cover and stuff, but
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I could Google this if but it was just
I don't
it's
know
just
if it's
weird.
available. Like
It's just weird that's sort of a oh no, they have it on PDF here. Yeah, Jesus Now. Oh yeah, look, they've got a free download on archive.org.
Well,
How Jesus has no past, will not come again, and in loving action is dissolving the molds of our spent society. What?
That's heresy.
Yeah.
Has no past,
Has
will
no
not
past,
come again.
will not come
and
again.
is dissolving the molds of our spent society. Two out of those three sentences are heretical.
Yeah.
Not that I have the authority to proclaim such things, but
Yes. Yeah.
it is my private and personal judgment that these are heresies.
Yeah. What a weird.
I'm not going to command anyone.
Strange man. Yeah.
You under a mandatum by a bishop who's not in my diocese.
But that's on the front
they
cover
have to
of the book.
prostrate
I'm
themselves
not
or
really.
anything like that, but
that's the front cover of the book. I'm not really like speculating on the content of it. That's just like what he said.
I think you should read some of it and report back with your findings.
Yeah, maybe I will. Do an investigation.
A little investigation into the.
But it's just weird, like that. You would have. The same personality come out with this that work, and then Windswept House.
Well, I mean, you had the same personality come out with the defense of the Seven Sacraments against Luther, and then,
well, that's true, right? Yeah,
and then just like torch this sucker to the ground.
Yeah, it's
so,
yeah. I guess people are able to
irrational
keep within themselves. Yeah, the most bizarre contradictions. Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. Is there anything more you wanted to say about that? Like, I just I mean, I guess
I also heard he went kind of off the rails the other way later too. That he
yeah,
kind
I
of
know.
went,
Yeah, being this.
I would have to look up
yeah.
whether or not that was true from his account to avoid internet
Calumny.
Yes, but from the sources that I received it from, who I think might be credible, he went a little bit off the rails towards the end of his life. Hopefully he didn't die like that. I mean, my goodness. But supposedly he was quite a learned Jesuit, before the
Sure.
council.
Right.
But that's no defense, as the lives of the church fathers repeatedly sort of illuminate. And often with great learning comes
Great temptation.
a great fall.
Great responsibility.
Well, I mean, yeah, you have a deep responsibility not to get full of
true.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
Which is difficult if you don't have wisdom, which wisdom properly gives you the perspective sort of the order of the universe from God's perspective.
Yeah.
And that, which was supposedly to go a little off topic, Blessed Raymond Lull, that was supposedly the mystical vision that he received shortly before he died. Was he actually sort of understood things from an, not obviously to make the heretical claim from God's perspective, but from a perspective that God gave him that no human could get, basically, of like a bit of God's perspective. And so like, I don't think that portion was communicated in any of his writings, much as we're missing really anything from Thomas after his mystical vision. I think that the commentary, I'd have to check, because I know before he died, he wrote a commentary in the Song of Songs, sorry, and I don't know if that's extant. Well, he didn't really write it. He was on the way to the council.
Yeah. When he fell
and then
ill.
he hit his head on a tree branch, and he had some fish, and he died at a Benedictine monastery. But while the monks were taking care of him, he gave them a running commentary in the Song of Songs. Well, they furiously scribbled it down because this was indeed the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yeah, well, no kidding.
Everything he says, write it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, true wisdom is to understand the world from God's perspective. So if we get ourselves full of learning, and then we remember that it's not anything really, we do sort of the old Socratic wisdom, right? The only thing that I know is I know nothing. It's not true. You know a little bit of something, but I mean, he was using hyperbole for the sake of humility, and that's like with respect to the divine logos, like you don't really know that much. So
Yeah.
chill out.
Yeah. I guess that is always the
That's why we have an
perspective when
authority in the church that we have to respect.
Yeah.
The deposit of faith.
Yeah, we have the deposit of faith, and we have
Magisterium.
magisterium, and we have Catholic YouTubers whose authority is preeminent.
No, that's not
what?
a thing.
Really?
No, like there should be like a little thing below. This is like not spiritual advice, like not medical advice or not not financial advice. We need a little tagline that says not theological advice.
But I always thought that they were the truth. I always thought that they knew.
I mean, we are unfortunately in an age where you have to kind of like look at the deposit of faith and what any single prelate, high-ranking member of the church happens to be saying. You're like, if they don't seem to square, the deposit of faith is, of course, correct. And if it happens to be maybe, I don't know, maybe perhaps a pope. If they say something, you're like, I don't know if that's right. We have to assume that what they're saying is the thing in the deposit of faith, and then turn off whatever is saying it to us, pick it up, throw it in the river, and then go read St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, that's probably a good bet. Or scripture.
Again, like I said last time, commentaries, approved good commentaries. Don't go trying to understand the scriptures by yourself. It's a bad idea. That's why we have a magisterium in the first place.
Sure. But I mean, there is, yeah, I mean, it's a bad
Many
idea
good
to try.
catechisms and manuals which will never lead you astray.
Sure, but it's bad in in capacity of trying to understand it in the way that it teaches the deposit of faith. But Scripture can speak to us personally as well. I mean, in a prayerful understanding, in the midst of like kind of in the sense of like private revelation of like Scripture speaking to me. I mean, that's kind of that's the predominant way of like the predominant reason to read Scripture as a non sort of as a person without teaching authority is to pray the Scripture, to practice Lexio.
Well, yeah. So there's a Protestant. It's a Protestant clergyman who said this famously. Now I can't remember. I can't remember his name. I'm gonna quickly cheat and find it out. Yes, Johann Bangel, who was a pietist. Ugh, gross. Apply yourself wholly to the text. Apply the text wholly to yourself. That's a good line.
Sure.
Blind squirrel, finds an acorn once in a while.
Yep. Oh. Yeah. Well, remember.
You will receive your reward in purgatory.
Indeed. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. And
Hit the button.